So, come on, you know what anime is, right? I mean, listen, it's one of the biggest storytelling mediums there is, so much so that the tropes found in it often end up influencing Western animation nowadays. You know that one visual gag where its character's face is suddenly way more serious and detailed than it is usually? Yeah, you can thank Dr. Slump for that. Oh, and don't even get me started on that damn bike slide. I haven't even watched Akira in its entirety, and I already know most of the plot, the video essays, and references alone. Point being, when people think about anime, the first thought is usually shonen battle anime. Well, that and Ghibli movies, Maho Shoujo, or God forbid, those shows targeted at teenage losers who get no pictures and stack no paper. You know, you got your Dragon Balls, your Naruto's, your One Pieces, your My Hero Academias, and Yu Yu Hakusho's, the list goes on. As opposed to shoujo anime slash manga, whose primary demographic is mostly young girls and teenagers, shonen anime and manga is the opposite, being primarily targeted at young boys and teenagers. You have your sports manga, your comedies, your life stories, and most importantly, you got your battle manga. You know, the ones they scheme for a few hours should end up getting stronger or have incredibly niche and interesting power systems. Those ones. The term shonen battle anime and shonen battle manga admittedly are kinda nebulous because in its simplest form, it's really just a term used to describe any series with a primary focus on winning the hands. Like, take Dragon Ball Z, these shonen battle anime, compared to something like Hajime no Ippo. Both of them have a lot of fighting, yeah, both of them set aside time for character development here and there, but on the other hand, take the fights in Dragon Ball and compare them to the fights in Ippo and tell me that one series isn't more about fighting than the other. For a more fair comparison, however, you could say the same thing about a show like Hajime no Ippo when compared to a show like Baki. Both of them were really similar in the sense that they're about martial arts and what it means to be strong, but the key difference is, unlike Ippo, which tries to keep things mostly grounded in how it handles fights and character development, Baki instead uses things like physics, science, and martial arts as an excuse to have cool set pieces and to glaze huge Ohama for the past 23 years now. The point being, just because a series has a lot of fighting in it doesn't automatically make it a shonen battle anime. But having good writing and intricate storytelling doesn't exclude something from being a shonen battle anime, or at the very least having some elements seen in the subgenre. Like, take a look at One Piece. There's enough lore in there to make any DM out there jealous, and technically speaking, it's more of an adventure shonen, but you can't lie. Come on, it does check a lot of the boxes. But for something more in line with proper battle shonen with complexity, you could just take a look at JoJo, Hunter x Hunter, and Yu Yu Hakusho. There is a reason why when you think of anime, one of the first things you think about is buff guys beating the absolute dog shit out of each other. Well, that and half-naked ladies, and things which I cannot describe unless this video get annihilated. That said, no matter where you look, you're bound to see the influence of anime and the tropes nowadays. The power of friendship, transformation sequences, long mid-fight monologues about philosophy, and perhaps the most ubiquitous of all, the edgy rival. Now, granted, this trope predates manga and anime by centuries, considering that protagonists have had foils ever since storytelling became a thing, but come on. Where would Goku be without Vegeta? Where would Zoro be without Sanji? Where would Yuji be without Megumi? Come on, Naruto and Sasuke had this scene where they straight up kissed in the first episode of the show, and don't even get me started on whatever shit Gojo and Gato had going on. If you want to go back even further, all I'm saying is, if Guts and Griffith had just got over themselves and shagged, Berserk probably wouldn't be as nearly as messed up as it is now. Not even that, but the homoerotic rivals aren't even just an anime thing. Let's take a look at a few video games that do it too. Metal Gear, Revolver Ocelot, and Jetstream Sand. Pokemon, and, assuming you're playing a male protagonist, Yakuza, the Mad Dog Shimano himself, Goro Majima. We even have this series that's notorious for being based off game manga, Ace Attorney, with whatever Phoenix Wright and Miles Edgeworth have going on. Persona? Come on, it's like 50 dudes up there I can name off the top of my head. Just look at Goro Akechi, for example. I don't know how, but they somehow made Yosuke even gayer than Kanji, the character who has an arc entirely dedicated to fighting the demon he knows as his bisexuality. We see it everywhere, and while it can be funny to point it out and form headcanons from time to time, I don't really see anyone ask why that's the case to begin with. Not that I'm surprised, but like, you'd be shocked how many homophobic anime fans there are, despite the fact that half the goats probably take it up the butt. That said, in order to get to the bottom of this, we're gonna have to look at Japan as a country first. You see, much like a lot of Asia as a whole, Christianity never gained too much of a following in Japan. Naturally, there were some outliers such as China's Taiping Rebellion, but even then, that wasn't as much a proper form of Christianity as much as a mostly inaccurate interpretation of Christianity made by a man who didn't know a lick of whatever language that guy found out Jesus from spoke. Not to mention, back in the Edo period, Japan was known for not really letting anyone in or out of the country, resulting in Japan straight up banning Christianity to stop Western influence of taking hold. I'm not going to claim that I'm an expert in Japanese history, or more broadly, Asian history for that matter, but the most important thing here is that since Christianity didn't take hold over there, there were never any outright bans of homosexuality or anything else of the sort until more recent years. It's that the chance of you getting hate crimes were pretty low. It was a kind of similar deal to ancient Greece in that regard. As long as you didn't bring it up and as long as you find a maid in air, somehow you were cool. That is to say, it wasn't until the Meiji Restoration, where Japan would start taking up more Western views on gender and sexuality, that there would be legislation made specifically against things such as gay marriage. But even so, historically speaking, if you wanted to be a little fruity, you were better off doing it in Asia than you were doing it in Europe. I'm not going to sit here and claim that I'm an expert in sociology and Japanese history, but if I had to explain why so many anime and manga have
Nice argument,
homoerotic
Senator. Why
undertones,
don't you back
I'd
up with
say
a
that
source?
probably
My
has at least
source is
something
that
to
I
do
made
with
it
it.
the
But that's
fuck
enough
up.
about history. Let's actually talk about some anime, huh? Also, before we get started, quick heads up, this isn't technically a video on queerbaiting, which is the positive intention writing something with gay themes and undertones, just to get people's attention before never fully committing, although there will be some overlap in these topics. Examples of shows with queerbaiting include Free, Netflix's Voltron, and other things of that nature. Anyway, stop me if you heard the story before. You're reading or watching something, and after a while, we start to notice that despite there being a dedicated love interest, the male protagonist actually ends up having a lot more chemistry with the male rival. They have a more interesting dynamic, a shared backstory, probably more screen time, and whenever they do talk, the tension ends up usually being thick enough to make you question whether or not they went to the same doctor as Drake. And you know what the funny thing is? I just described 3 shows: Naruto, Jujutsu Kaisen, and My Hero Academia. Maybe Hunter x Hunter if you squint hard enough, but that's neither here nor there since Golden Killer don't meet till the Hunter exams. I'd also say Evangelion, but I'm keeping the stack. I haven't actually watched it, and everything I've learned about that show has been through cultural osmosis, and I don't plan on changing that anytime soon. But from what I have seen, oh boy, that deserves its own video if and when I ever get around to doing that.
Grace? I'm saying I like you.
Like, come on. It's about as gay as you can get without showing Shinji and Kaworu make out on screen. In any case, while you can't blame this kind of stuff on things like Kishimoto's and Toyo's inability to like women, or Gege Akatami's rapid onset misogyny, as odd as it may seem, for all intents and purposes, situations like this tend to be coincidental for the most part. Like, yeah, for as gay as Naruto and Sasuke are, and I mean, they're gay enough for Naruto to still believe in Sasuke and keep giving them chance after chance to redeem himself, even though he ran away from home to become the ninja version of domestic terrorist. They're not actually gay enough to marry each other, rather than Hinata and Sakura, respectively. Despite the large number of signs alluding to it, the canon outcome turns all that homoerotic tension into nothing more but subtext. On one hand, you can chalk things up to the heavy emphasis Naruto as a series puts on the acceptance of oneself, believing in your friends, connecting with others, and caring about the people around you and all that other good sentimental power friendship bullshit that I love. But on the other hand, as much as I understand the typical romance, like I've been in the male gym locker room in high school before, but after a certain point, there's only so much disbelief you can suspend. By all means, the canon says they're straight. But the canon also says that they've been obsessed with each other ever since Ninja Middle School, and have remained obsessed with each other ever since one of them disappeared for half a decade for, like I said earlier, the intent of becoming a ninja terrorist. Oh, and not to mention, if you want to say that Sasuke was one of the only people to really understand Naruto, need I remind you that Shikamaru is really right there? Oh, and what about Sasuke? The man who not only had one, not two, but 3 women feeding through his attention throughout the entire series and never once gave a fuck. But the second Naruto came back, he was acting a fool. Say what you will, but me personally, either Sasuke's got some serious autism, he's secretly arrow raced but getting married somehow plus a secret agenda of his, or he planned to come out as bisexual, but Itachi murdered the entire clan, put a pause on things, and says development back a few years, or some wacky mixture of any of the previous things I have just listed. Same goes to Naruto too, because there's no way anyone in their right mind would try to maintain a relationship with that spiky-haired edgelord when people who actually enjoy being around you like Lee and Shikamaru are right there. Naruto isn't even the only example of something like this. Just take a look at My Hero Academia if you want to see more of it. Granted, the 2 series have a fair bit of overlap in overall messaging, and Deku's entire thing is that he's a really nice and forgiving guy that tries his best to reach out and save all the people he can, but consider the following. Bakugo's just kind of a bitch. I'm not saying he's evil, he does get a fair share of development throughout the entire events of the story, but if I was Deku, I promise you, I would have clutched that fight against Todoroki specifically just to have an excuse to lay generational hands on Bakugo. All I'm saying is, I'd have My Hero Academia looking like Jujutsu Kaisen with the combos I'd be dropping on him with one throw. And yet, despite all the things Bakugo put Deku through during their childhoods, Deku still wants to be a part of Bakugo's life. Is that because he's gay, or is that because he's just that good of a guy? No idea. But in defense of My Hero Academia's rancid fanbase, maybe they got a point sometimes. Just saying. On the flip side, you have kids that enjoy each other's company a little too much despite their bickering. like Satoru Gojo and Suguru Geto for the previously mentioned Jujutsu Kaisen, the duo who would birth the tweet that will give you the inspiration for this video. I've talked about the two in their powers briefly in a couple of my previous vids, but for the people who don't know anything about Jujutsu Kaisen, the basic idea is that Gojo can see really good and create infinite distance between him and anything else, literally making him untouchable. Geto, on the other hand, can use cursed spirits manifestations of negative energy like Pokemon. This is important because in Jujutsu Kaisen, abilities like this are incredibly strong and thus are incredibly rare. Yada yada. While I'm not too big of a Gojo glazer, unlike certain girlies in Jujutsu Kaisen fandom, I will admit he's one of, if not the sauciest characters in the entire universe, and Gojo is well aware of that. However, before becoming known as the sauciest, he had to live his life as just one of the strongest, sitting behind none other than Trench Body Toji himself, who I talked about at length a couple of videos. But closely behind Gojo was none other than everyone's favorite war criminal, Suguru Geto. Geto, unlike Gojo, who had the benefit of being born in one of the most powerful and influential clans in the world of JJK, was more or less just a normal guy. Sure, he could order around curses like Pokemon, but at the same time, he also doesn't have a clan backing him, and in spite of that, his curse technique and the sheer versatility and power gave him the potential to be one of the strongest characters in the verse if used correctly. I'd love to talk more at length about how deep Geto's back could have been if he stuck around longer, but alas, this isn't a video about power scaling, this is a video about game manga. And if you know anything about game manga, you know that in comparison to just about everything else being published in Shonen Jump right now, save for maybe Kaguya-Bachi, Jujutsu Kaisen's about as gay as you're gonna get these days. That being said, Gojo and Geto have just about everything I talked about earlier. The tension, the chemistry, and of course, thematic parallels. This isn't really a video summarizing the events of the hidden inventory arc, so I won't delve too deep into that there if you want to experience it for you. But for what it's worth, while it's far for the first series to do so, Jujutsu Kaisen's approach to the age-old question of what it means to be strong serves as an excellent reminder of why that question keeps getting asked so much to begin with. In the opening section of the arc, Geto and Gojo have a classic anime shonen rival debate about philosophy, with Gojo talking about the survival of the fittest, while Geto goes on and on about how it's a duty of the strong to protect the weak. This alone is interesting enough, given how Gojo and Geto's worldviews both take a 180 after the encounter with Toji and the death of Riko Amanai, but there's something else I feel that people overlook just a tiny bit, and that's a contrast between Geto and Gojo's upbringings that caused them to hold these beliefs to begin with. First things first, though, shout out to Rap Petty for putting it so eloquently, but in life, there's people everywhere with the potential to be generational talents, but potential isn't enough. You also need the opportunity to display that potential, and that's assuming you even have that potential to begin with. Because of this, when we see people from rich or influential families with insane amounts of talent, we often laud them as examples as to why people in power deserve their status. But in reality, the only real difference is that they had access to tools they need to maximize that potential. And Gojo is a prime example of this. As strong as the six eyes and limitless are, let's strip away all of the Gojo clan's history, wealth, and influence. How far does Satoru get? Sure, based off the sheer amount of curse energy in his body and the versatility of the six eyes alone, that'll be enough to carry him pretty far. But what if he were from a more normal family, didn't have the knowledge of other six eyes and limited users from the past to back him up? Let alone the fact that he's been immersed in Jujutsu from birth, unlike Geto, how likely would it have been for him to clutch out the hollow purple against Toji? What if Geto came from a powerful clan? What if curse spirit manipulation was an inherited curse technique that had centuries worth of well-guarded knowledge? What if Suguru could just have a few special grade curses in his family so he could have some legendary Pokemon to call on when things got traumatic? What if Geto was the one to learn the first curse technique after being waxed bad by Toji, and ended up having a second one that let him drop a full power Uzumaki on his ass? Geto had all the potential in the world to be one of, if not the strongest person in the series, but for a myriad of reasons, he just couldn't make the cut. Still though, for that brief moment of Geto and Gojo in the same league, we get to see that in spite of their differences, they could at least take comfort in the fact that they had finally met someone who could finally understand the other's position. Gojo, because of his strength, lauded as the strongest person to ever exist, and as such, didn't feel the need of try or care about anything because he knew he'd never face any lasting consequences. He would have fans, admirers, but he wouldn't have much in terms of general connections with other people. Hell, the show goes as far to establish that him being so ungodly strong makes it so he has zero respect for the decorum coming up. But when Geto told Goji to start being more polite, he doesn't do it immediately, but if you watch Jujutsu Kaisen a lot, you start to notice that Gojo in his adult years uses boku, the more polite way of saying you in Japanese, a lot more than it says ore, the more informal and unpleasant way of saying it. And, of course, after Geto has a mental breakdown and goes on a rampage, assaulting and a hit being put on him, Gojo is the one that has to take it. And you know what he does? He lets him go. I shit you not. But not before Geto asks him a question that not only be directed towards Gojo, but also the audience. Are you the strongest because you're Satoru Gojo, or are you Satoru Gojo because you're the strongest? Gojo, rather than finishing the job, he stands there telling Geto he can end things right then and there and air out the entire block, Geto included, if he really wanted to. But he doesn't. Gojo lets him leave, and even during the events of Jujutsu Kaisen Zero, up until right before his clash with Sukuna, Gojo never really feels any kind of hatred for Geto, and in the end, he still considered him his best friend. Kinda like someone else I complained about earlier, but unlike Naruto, Gojo's a much bigger menace, so it's not like him getting better friends is really an option. That said, among other things, behind seeing Rico getting domed right in front of him, and the other going gap in strength between Geto and Gojo, one of the biggest reasons for Geto's downward spiral was that Gojo just no longer had the time for him due to being assigned more and more dangerous missions. If you're seeing a pattern by now, as you can probably tell, a recurring theme in shonen battle anime and manga is deep bonds between one party and another, both healthy and unhealthy. And more often than not, while they may not be explicitly romantic, they at the very least stretch into queer platonic territory. Queer platonic being a word for attention and affection, but ultimately non-romantic relationships. It may feel and look gay, and well, queer is in the name, so it isn't necessarily off the table, but officially, there's no romantic attraction involved. Still, with that in mind, I don't think that's enough to justify it sometimes. Like, bro, Gato's voice actor was directed to say Satu like somebody's wife was saying the name. And come on, if that's not gay, I don't know what is. Not to mention, we see deep bonds between two male characters all the time in media, and by no means am I saying that having a close friend that's the same gender as you automatically makes you gay. Hell, I'm even a victim of that kind of thinking myself. However, even in the same series, we see deep bonds between characters of the same gender without nearly as much homoerotic tension. Should know who else has a deep bond with Yuji and also drops life lessons on him whenever the two are around each other? My glorious king, Aoi Todo. And in spite of the fact that he spends about 75% of the time around Yuji shirtless, the relationship between Todo and Yuji, while deep, is nowhere nearly as gay as whatever the hell Gojo and Geto had going on. Now, you would think a big shirtless buff guy yelling about how much he loves big booty bitches and a specific pop idol around a bunch of dudes to feel at least a little gay after a while, but nah, not at all. Toto, eccentricities aside, is one of the best examples of positive masculinity in recent media that I can think of. And almost everything she's done as of right now has been in the name of uplifting and doing right by its best friend Yuji, even if it was a little one-sided at first. Toto was able to pull up, bring Yuji back from the lowest he's ever been, and make sure he came back better than ever after everything was said and done, which is a lot better than what Gojo could say. And you know what else Gojo could say? That he too was an incredibly strong person that people didn't really like because they were weirdo and had no choice to respect because of their strength. Say what you will about Toto, but he's been nothing but A1 since day one. In respect for Yuji, you can also tell that it's because Yuji's his best friend, unlike Geto and Gojo, where you can tell that they're best friends, but you can also tell that there may or may not be something else going on behind the scenes, but you know neither of them are going to bring it up because that'd be too weird to talk about. Like, again, this isn't even just an anime thing. Look at Ace Attorney, which I still was notorious for being based off a manga, which isn't technically untrue, but I did leave a little something out. That being that I meant the character designs. Not the story and the relationship between Phoenix Light slash Ryuichi Naruhodo and Mouse Edrift slash Reiji Mitsurugi, but rather the character designs. Yeah, apparently the lead artist, Kumiko Tsurakane, was apparently super into yaoi, and because of this, she decided to make Edgeworth look younger and more handsome, despite the initial plan being that he was supposed to look more like a regular middle-aged man. That aside, while the story may not take any direct inspiration from BL, aka Boys Love manga, it does still manage to see a striking number of similarities character design aside. Them being childhood friends, the massive amounts of homoerotic tension and damn near every trial, the fact that Phoenix canonically became a lawyer because it's all Edgewood being super sad in the newspaper once, the fanboy and pettiness, and you know. Again, this isn't a video on queer baiting, I'm not too big in Ace Attorney, so really I can't say much here. But going off of what I do know, there's way too much overlap to chalk as all of coincidence. Or maybe there isn't at all, and this is all just a result of me projecting my Russian way of thinking onto something that doesn't need it, despite the fact that gay people obviously also exist in Japan. Yeah, man. Listen, as much as I want there to be some kind of grand rule at the end of this video, I'm not gonna lie to you, there isn't much I could say here. Maybe I can chalk up the cultural differences, maybe I can chalk up the toxic masculinity at large, discouraging men from ever getting too close to one another, lest they be called gay, or maybe I'm just doing what I do best and yapping just to yap at this point. But this is, one, two, three, four, five. But since this is the last video I've got for Pride Month, I don't know. I think it's a top that has at least some merit in exploring, unlike those motherfuckers keep calling people toys would like us to think. Like I just said a few seconds back, there's people out there who are too afraid of getting close to others out of fear of a whole lot of stuff, really. Fear that they'll lose them, fear that they'll end up ruining what they have somehow, and fear of ridicule from people around them. And to me, that's a very clear experience. I can't speak on everyone's behalf, but at least for me, I found the idea of having someone that completely gets it and shares a lot of the same struggles, having someone who makes me want to strive to be better in spite of your flaws, and someone that'll accept you ugliness and all. I'd be a lie if I said it wasn't at least a little comforting to me. Like, yearning's the most fun a girl could have without taking her clothes off. Let's be real here. In anime, manga, and whatever storytelling medium there is out there, I feel that the desire for acceptance and understanding is a theme in which queer people everywhere can get behind. And as it turns out, that tends to be a pretty common theme in a lot of anime. Maybe it is just me, but jokes aside, when I do see people headcanon kids like Megami, Sasuke, and even Vegeta as at least a little fruity, I can't say I don't entirely get where they're coming from. Whether it's intentional or not, at a certain point, you just gotta admit, some things just don't have a heterosexual explanation. But I digress. Anyway, that's all the time we got for today. If you'd like the Yap session, I'm gonna like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell if you want more too. So, without further ado, thank you for coming, thank you for staying, and thank you for watching the show. Happy Pride Month, what's left of it anyway. Take care of yourself. Peace.